So I watched the Grammys last night, and it got me thinking about this sentiment that comes around almost every year, I feel like, with the Grammys. That art shouldn't be a competition. That, like, we should basically stop with all this, all the fan wars, all the award shows. Or maybe that's not exactly what they're saying. I don't think they're saying we should stop with it. I think they're basically, the sentiment's advocating that we focus on the comparison of art a lot less. And on the surface, I definitely do agree with this sentiment, right? That, like, art as something to be evaluated is not really what I do. I think if you're familiar with me in any sort, you know that, like, I definitely advocate for a very bubbly perspective on art, where it's, a lot of everyone's valid, everyone's doing amazing work, no matter what the standards are. A lot of people disagree with that, but I'm someone who, I fully believe that art is, like, subjective through and through. So, on the surface, I agree with it. But the statement, art shouldn't be a competition, I think maybe I don't agree with, which is strange, right? Because obviously me saying that all art is subjective and that, like, you can't really compare or critique or judge anything would lead to a competition being impossible. How can you judge if there's no rubric? How can you judge if there's nothing to judge, right? And I think two things can be true. That I think art should be a competition, and that I think art should be a competition without a winner, is maybe the way that I would phrase that. Because I think to say that art shouldn't be a competition would be to deny a lot of great work. And I know I'm in the minority on this. I'm for sure in the minority on this. Like, Rick Rubin says in his book, who a lot of people hate him, but I think he has some good things to say. I think he kind of knows what he's talking about when he talks about art. And he says that, like, art based on spite or competition usually feels empty and leads everyone nowhere. And I get why he's saying that. I think there's examples of that. But I think there's also a plethora of examples of competition and rivalry motivating people to make even better art. You know what I mean? I think an example you can even look at of this, and it's like, at this point a little played out to say it, especially with how big it got and how much discussion and discourse there was around it. But the recent feud between Drake and Kendrick is a huge example of this, right? That was competition in art, and without that competition, I mean, I personally love almost every song that came out of that, to be honest. I mean, even Push-Ups and Family Matters, the Drake songs, like, those are solid songs. Like, we got a lot of great stuff out of that. We have a whole, like, mini album of content that wouldn't have existed before without this art being made in a competitive spirit. I don't know if this is true, but last night at the Grammys, which, by the way, when you guys are watching this, I think it'll be like 3 nights ago was the Grammys, or 2 nights ago, but that's besides the point. I don't know if this is true, but I think Not Like Us took home some of the most awards for a rap song, like, ever. Like, I think it did. And I mean, that's a song that is definitely, I think I have a biased perspective on it now because it got a little overplayed, at least where I'm at. But I still think it's an amazing song, and that's something that wouldn't have come if it wasn't for competition in art. I think art is, would I say art's inherently competitive? No. Like, it happens, you know what I mean? And I think art can be, well, it's strange because I'm saying art can be a competition with no winner, but how, like, there was a winner of the Kendrick and Drake feud, you know what I mean? Like, obviously, the winner in this case, I guess, is a little different because that was more of a thing of public perception than anything else, right? That wasn't really, like, I think it'd be a little wrong to say Kendrick won because he objectively made the better songs. I think if the same songs were released, but we were in some parallel universe where everyone was like, no, these Drake songs are way better, wouldn't he have technically won? Like, I think that was more a thing of public perception than it was any sort of objective scaling between the two songs. But, as much as, like, I think art shouldn't be competitive in the sense that there will never be a clear winner. Like last night at the Grammys, there was, I'm sure you all know, a huge robbery because Brat didn't win Album of the Year, right? Cowboy Carter won. In my opinion, I would have went for Brat, or Rise and Fall of Midwest Princess, or Hit Me Hard and Soft. I liked a lot of those better. And that's all to say that, like, there can be this competition to motivate these artists to perform better and make something truly amazing and achieve that level of acclaim and those heights, right? Without actually being objective. Because I don't think, one of the great things I think about the Grammys is that it's almost just a signifier. You know what I mean? I think another example of this is Nobel Prizes. When a scientist makes a huge discovery or something, they get a Nobel Prize, and that doesn't in any way say that the other scientific discoveries aren't good or valid. They're still scientific discoveries, they're still important. It's just almost showing that there is a height of achievement here. There is a top level to this. And sometimes, I mean, we can all agree that top level gets it wrong. I think a huge example of that, it was the 2012 or 2013 Grammys, where Macklemore won over like Kendrick and Yeezus, and oh god, I think there were some other albums there. But we can all look at that and go, okay, that was wrong. That was definitely the wrong answer, in my opinion. I mean, of course, I think it's all subjective, but the public perception of this is that's the wrong answer. So, but we can all understand that, like, just because it gets to the signifier doesn't mean it's the best, but it still does provide some semblance of motivation, right? And I wonder how much I'm correct in saying this, because as much as I believe this, I could also see it being more defeating for artists than anything. I would think personally, or not think, but like I know personally, when I look at the Grammys happening, and I look at like an artist like a Kendrick Lamar, who's an amazing artist, go up there and accept an award again and again for this amazing song he made, and then see him accept them for albums and everything, that just serves to inspire me. I'm like, oh my god, this is, like, you can achieve these heights. This is something so insane. And from what I've heard, I mean, I don't know anyone who has any Grammys, to be fair, but from what I've heard when artists speak about the Grammys, even if they're speaking at it with a relatively negative tone, a lot of the time they still are, like, inspired by it, if that makes sense. Which is really interesting. Like, they're like, I've always dreamed of getting a Grammy, I've always aspired to do that. Even if they're like, I don't like the fact that this award show gives people any sort of, is controlling any sort of validation. I guess you could equate this almost in the same way to the way that, like, a lot of people make stuff on social media just for clicks, just for likes, right? But that doesn't make it, there's still great content coming out because of that. Just because the motivation is something that I think a lot of people would deem to be less, if you say that, like, oh, I made this because I wanted some clicks, people would deem that to be less, I don't know, noble. Is noble the word? People kind of look down upon it. That doesn't mean that it's not gonna still produce this great stuff that it has, And I think competition in art is, like, relatively the same way. Because even if you're like, oh, it's kind of shallow that they put all this work in because they wanted an award for it, the work still produced a great album, It still produced a great piece of work. And this is why I say that, like, competition art isn't like the end all be all. I don't think it's, I'm not, as much as I'm sitting here having a conversation about it now, I'm not gonna, like, talk about it as if it's I'm not gonna, what's the word? Oh my god, why can't I think of the word? I'm not gonna, like, give it acclaim. Is that the thing? No, that's not what I'm looking for. But you know what I mean. I'm not gonna, like, say it's the best. I'm not gonna admire competition. But I will say that, like the sentiment that it's a force of net bad, or that it's really not a good thing, I think is just, like, fairly objectively incorrect, because it's produced so many great things. I mean, even, like, Kendrick and Drake was something that happened this year. It's easy to go back to. But outside of that, like, historically, there are other examples of that. I mean, one in recent history is Michael Jackson and Prince. I know they had a rivalry. I don't know exactly the minutia of it, to be honest. I unfortunately will admit I've never really listened to much from either of these artists, but I do know for a fact that they had a rivalry and that it motivated them to both be better. And we got amazing music from the both of them, you know what I mean? Those are two of the most acclaimed artists ever because, and not singularly because, but I'm sure that them trying to be better than the other really did motivate that. A lot of the time being, you know, maybe it's not exactly competition that drives it, but more so rivalry, more so aspiration. You know, if the Grammys didn't exist, if we didn't have this competition in art, if we didn't hold artists up against one another, would there be any glory in the game? You know what I mean? Like, would there be any glory in trying to make the best thing if there wasn't someone out there like trying to point, like, not even trying to point at the best thing, but saying there is a best thing? You know what I mean? Because if we took art, and this is strange for me because I'm kind of going against my own conceptions about art, where I view art as this wholly postmodern thing, right? I'm like, art is all subjective and there's not an ounce of objectivity you could get in there. But I also do understand that, like, if you were to take away all the objectivity that the rest of the world applies to it, that we'd all be running around without like a zeitgeist right now. Like, we have a cultural zeitgeist because we as a society, even though I disagree with it, but we all have a perception that like there is such thing as the best art piece. We all think the Mona Lisa is the best painting. That's the socially acceptable best painting, right? Or not socially acceptable, socially accepted best painting. So like, or maybe culturally accepted, the word I'm looking for. Yeah, culturally accepted best painting. So without having like these things that I believe to be BS, and I think if you're an artist, someone who creates things, it's more valuable to treat concepts like objectivity in art as BS than it is to treat them as anything valid. Because I think if you treat them as anything valid, you will end up making shallow art, right? But the fact that there is a canon of like the socially considered best stuff, as long as you can appreciate it for what it is, as just things that are considered to be great, not things that are genuinely the best ever made, I think that can be a very useful thing. Because would art be what it is without aspiration? And I think that's where I more so defend competition in art, is from this lens of aspiration. Not so much that I think like we should be pitting artists against each other. Honestly, it makes me kind of sad when, this is crazy that I'm saying this makes me sad, but like when you have two artists you really like get nominated against each other for a Grammy, I am like, I wish they could both win. I liked both those songs. I liked both those albums. And I think that like having competition is not so much good in the sense of like, I want to see a winner. I don't want to see domination. In fact, I would argue I really dislike seeing domination. Like, I know personally, I have nothing for or against Taylor Swift. I've probably listened to like, you know, I know her hits, I like a little bit of folklore, but I wouldn't say I'm exactly pro or against Taylor Swift. But like, she's won Album of the Year the last couple years in a row, or a lot, right? I'm like, I would not like her to win it this year, not because I don't like her. I quite frankly didn't even listen to her newest album. I have nothing to say about it. But I just want to see someone else win. I want to see someone else go up there and give a speech, you know? And as much as I would hope it's an artist I like the fact that like, that this drives this aspiration of like, I want to make the best thing humanly possible because I accept that there is a height to this, that there is, you know, something, which is why like, I think it's so, you know, a big thing that I eventually want to talk about is hypocrisy here, because I think the hypocrisy is kind of everything, right? You have to be a hypocrite to live, I think, because I think the most direct example of this is like in the way things are made, right? Everything I'm recording with here, like from the palette to the paint to the, you know, phone that I have recording this to the microphone, was all probably made in a way I wouldn't approve of, right? Like if I saw how this stuff was being made, manufactured, I don't think I'd approve of it. I would hope also that a lot of you wouldn't approve of it either, because it's probably not the prettiest thing. because it's very unethical, it's happening across the world, you know, domination of the global south, all this stuff, right? And yet I'm still here using it, you know what I mean? I kind of have to, I think on a daily basis, to exist with a relative level of cognitive, or of sanity, we all have to apply a ton of cognitive dissonance to it that basically makes us all, you know, a hypocrite in one way or another, which is one of the reasons I think that, like, and this is kind of, I don't know, I know people will view this as a very bad take, but I think that it's completely okay to have two contradictory beliefs, because sometimes beliefs, I don't think beliefs are that simple as like, you know, everything will be 100% consistent all the time. I think you should try and make them consistent. I'm not saying this is an excuse to say that, like, you can believe and do whatever you want, you know? I don't think you should run around trying to be a hypocrite, but I do think that, like, having two beliefs that will relatively conflict with each other is a good thing. And this is all to say that when it comes to art, when it comes to what I'm talking about right here, these two beliefs I have that conflict with each other would be that I think that art is wholly subjective. I think that anyone who tries to say it's objective is missing the point, right? I don't believe in art criticism, but I also think it's a net good to art in general and to the arts that there is a cultural, oh my God, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about it, and they had a really great word for it that's like the technically right thing. But, you know, the culturally zeitgeist of what everyone, the cultural zeitgeist of what everyone accepts to be like the best stuff. I can say that, like, as much as I think art is wholly subjective, I think it's a net good that we have this zeitgeist because, well, I just do. I think that it inspires everyone to be a lot better. I think that there's a lot of positives to this, even if I disagree with it existing. Does that make sense? Almost like on a theoretical versus on a, you know, functional basis. Does that make sense? Like, in theory, I think we should all understand that art is fully subjective, that there is no objectivity, but functionally, I think it's also a great thing that we have this. I do think, though, that this has to come with an understanding that the zeitgeist isn't real. You know what I mean? And that it's there to be broken. I think that if we were to accept this as objective truth, we'd end up in a very boring state artistically. You need people to understand that the zeitgeist isn't real, because then you get groundbreaking stuff. You get your Picassos, you get your Warhols who come along, they do something that's really controversial and really well done, because they understand that the zeitgeist is basically, it's a social construct, right? What is considered to be the best art is not actually the best art, it's art that everyone has come along and went, this is what I deem to be the best, and now it's socially accepted. And I don't want to say this is any sort of like elitist, but I think a lot of the times people don't really have, not that they don't have the capacity to, but they don't have the time nor the care to really critically think about art. You know what I mean? Now, I don't think anyone is walking through the Louvre going like, you know, the Mona Lisa is pretty cool, but the death of Jean-Paul Marat down there is critically a lot better for X, Y, and Z. If that were to happen, if everyone were to have that level of like critical thought every time they looked at an art piece, we'd be in a very different world. I think that perhaps even like a much better world. I mean, I think that's kind of something you could argue. But I don't think that people do that, not because they don't have the capacity to. I think everyone does. And I think that, like, something I honestly try to do a lot is like motivate people to think like that. You know what I mean? Of like, okay, this is cool, but I really like this because of X, Y, and Z, and like go more into their personal tastes. That's definitely something I motivate people to do. But I think that that's why the cultural zeitgeist gets to function, because we all have this perception of like, oh no, this is the best stuff, you know? And then after a while, it turns into sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I have it in my mind that the Mona Lisa is the best art piece. When I go to see the Mona Lisa, it's gonna be way more exciting because I have to wait in this line and I have to get up close to it than it will to see the death of Jean-Paul Marat down the hall in the Louvre, you know? And I think that that's like really interesting because it's like, it almost makes an interesting scenario where this thing is real and I think it's good that it exists, but it's also something that everyone in the world gets to break if they want to. Like, it's a total, I think it's like the word social construct I throw around a lot, and it gets thrown around a lot in general, because I mean, a lot of things are social constructs, right? Like money technically is just a social construct, but it rules everything, right? But I think this idea of art criticism and like culturally accepted art being a social construct is so interesting to me, because it's one of those things that you don't have to do any work to break free of. We can all understand that things like money, racism, prejudice, all these things are social constructs, right? They have to be to exist, but you can't break free of them. Just everyone tomorrow going, you know, all prejudice is social construct and we can let it go, will not actually fix prejudice, because it's not that simple. But you individually going like, oh, perceived best art and art criticism are social constructs, and there's no objectivity in art, is so cool, because right now, literally this second, you get to just break free of that. You get to stop doing that, and you will fully view the world differently. And I think that's why I think that's so cool, and something I work in a lot. You know, one of my big things I've been trying to do lately is really find out like purpose. You know, like I've always had a degree of like knowing what I want to do and what I want to get across, and the things I make, and the videos I make, and the paintings and the writing I do, and all the stuff I make. But I've kind of been wanting to find lately, like, what's the big overarching thing here? Because I feel like so much of it relates. In general, if you look at every video I've made, every discussion I've had in Paint and Talk, there's kind of a through line, right? Whether it's functional or theoretical, I don't know. But there's kind of a through line, and I think that through line has to do with perception. As a kid, I was always really average at everything, right? But I always was like, my one good thing, and this was weird that I was thinking about this at, I don't know, 10 or like 12 or whenever I was really starting to think like this. I was like, the one thing I am really good at though is like, I can understand perspective very well. Like I can look through the other, like I can understand something from the other person's shoes, and like I'm kind of good at that, right? And I think that's like maybe the through line that I want to get across in like how perspective impacts our perception of the world around us. Because nothing is true and everything is true when you look at it like that. And I feel like I just said nothing, but I also understood what I meant. Like, does that make sense? Like me going like, when you look at the world from everyone's shoes, nothing makes sense and everything makes sense. Like that's like words, like that's a total word salad. But let me know if that makes sense to you, what I'm saying there. Because that makes complete sense to me, even though I can't explain it. Because maybe it was just words, but I don't know, let me know. And relating this back to the main topic here about competition in art, that's where I think that that's why I think it's okay to have the contradictory beliefs of every album that was nominated for Album of the Year last night was extremely good. They're all amazing, amazing albums, and it's subjective which one's actually your favorite, which one's genuinely good. But I still think it's a good thing that one album won, and that we have now this idea of Cowboy Carter is technically Album of the Year. Whether you agree or not, now it technically is, right? This, simply the concept of there being an Album of the Year that people will vie for, I think is functionally a good thing, as long as everyone vying for that thing understands how arbitrary it is. And that's I think the bigger conversation maybe sitting right behind this is, does it matter if it's arbitrary? Because I've always, this is a big perspective change I've been having lately, actually. I've always viewed things that are arbitrary as completely and utterly invalid. Like if I was to say something is arbitrary, to me it means nothing, and I get to do whatever I want with that thing. But I was on the call with someone the other day. I don't know if he wants to be named, so I won't name him. But I was on the call with somebody, or on a call, not the call. No, I'll stick with that. I actually like that. I was on the call with somebody the other day, and he said, I mentioned that, we were talking about art criticism, and I said, well, that's arbitrary though. And he went, yeah, I don't think it being arbitrary invalidates it at all. Just because it's arbitrary and we as a collective decide what it is and how it functions doesn't make it any less real or meaningful. And it's something I've really been thinking about, because I've always had the preconceived notion, and I don't know where this came from, but I've always had the preconceived notion that arbitrary equals meaningless and it doesn't matter and I should ignore it. But he's right in a sense. Things that are arbitrary, just because it's arbitrary doesn't make it any less valid, you know? And that's something I'm really thinking about a lot lately. And I don't know how I feel about it just yet, because I think in a way he's definitely just like, you know, right? For an example, I mean, money is arbitrary. We collectively came up with money and currency, and now it rules everything, you know what I mean? But that doesn't make money any less real. But I feel like money also, in a way, has transitioned, and this is where, like, I'm not really an economist or anything, so I don't understand this quite well enough to really talk about it, but in some way, money has transitioned from being a social construct that we came up with to being very, very real. Because you need, you know, me going like money is a social construct is not going to stop my landlord from evicting me. Like if my landlord's like, you need to pay rent now, and I'm like, dude, it's social construct. Let's just calm ourselves down. This is a complete social construct made up by people centuries ago. He'd be like, okay, so do you have the money? And I'd be like, no, it's social construct, and he'd evict me, and then I'd be homeless. And that doesn't, you know, technically all that was arbitrary, but it's not. You know, I think this is what the guy said on the call. Language is arbitrary, and it totally is. That doesn't make language any less real. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I'm technically speaking to you with something arbitrary right now. Or not technically, I just am. And it's everything. You know what I mean? We wouldn't have anything without language. So that's interesting. I think that's one of the big points where I'm thinking like, oh, maybe things that are arbitrary actually do have a ton of meaning with them. I could even see myself fully flip-flopping from things that are arbitrary have no meaning to things that are arbitrary have more meaning than things that aren't arbitrary, you know? But I don't know why. Like, do you guys ever do that with yourself, by the way? This is a total tangent to finish things off here, actually. We're getting into the end of this. This is a total tangent, but do you guys ever, like, sit back and just think to yourself, like, you know, I could see myself becoming X soon. Of, like, I could see myself acquiring this belief. Before, I talked about it in, I think it was Paint&Talk 12, was the Paint&Talk that I talked about my spiritual beliefs. And I remember, like, a month before that, I was talking to my friend, we're getting pizza, and I was just like, I could see myself believing in God soon. And I didn't know why. Do you ever just get that, like intuition in your head of, like, I feel like I'm gonna change this belief soon, and I don't know why. And then it always changes. It's almost like you just need that seed planted in the back of your mind to slowly get the front to accept that, like, seeing this thing a little differently. I don't know, though. That's a whole other can of worms. I don't know how this started with talking about if art should be competitive, but either way, the verdict is yes. It is competitive. Either, you know, jokes aside, I hope you got something out of that. You know, just thinking about that because of the Grammys and wanted to come here and discuss it a little bit. Originally, this was going to be a main channel video, but I'm currently reworking my main channel, totally, so it's not now. And that's the over-under to that. It was here now. You just watched it, so I just got everything out already. Outside of that, you guys know the drill. Go check out The Painting on the Instagram. This is just a composition I wanted to do. I'm going to explain these sometimes, by the way, in the Paint&Talks now. I kind of want to. So what I did here was I wanted to do, like, almost the blue and the yellow are vying for space, but I want to choose blue and yellow because they're two colors with positive connotations. You know, blue often represents hope in, like, universal symbols, which also might not be real, but that's a whole other Paint&Talk. Yellow obviously represents light and, like, prosperity and, like, the future, you know? So these are two colors with positive connotations, and whichever you like more is wholly subjective. If I were to do a blue and red, oftentimes red is seen as more aggressive, where blue is seen as more hopeful. So it's inferring that there's a good side there. Same thing with yellow and purple. Purple is often used to represent more dark energy, night, yellow is daylight. So I wanted to do blue and yellow because they're two contrasting colors that are equally positive in connotation, showing how, like, two subjective forces will sort of, like, they're having a competition, but they're subjective, like art, you know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like I didn't explain that very well. Let me know if you get it. If not, if you didn't get it, go check the Instagram, see how I worded that way better. And until tomorrow, this has been Paint&Talk. Oh, wait. How do I do it again? Okay, all right, wait. We gotta... Guys, gals, and pals, this has been Paint&Talk episode 36. I'm here every day, daily, painting and talking with you all at 9 a.m. EST, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.